Just home reaction. This is Russia is running out of people. What is by some polymatter? I don't know if I've watched polymatter video in the past or not, but there you go. This is a polymatter video. Yeah, Russia has been running out of people since World War II, but I'm guessing with the current thing, it doesn't help. But I don't know, man. How many people have been conscripted so far? Like, its number is like good enough, right? Like, if you're like 500,000 or something, like there was like 200,000, and there was like more 300,000. Like, you reaching like 500,000 numbers. These are big ass numbers. Like in the in the past, all the wars you see like they're like few 100,000, 500,000. That is the numbers flying around. World War II number is insane. Obviously, World War One is also big, but that's why they were. It was called the Great War. But even today, in this complex conflict, in this conflict, which is not really world war, is it? So even then, it's like you're like reaching 500,000 numbers. So I don't know. Is that enough for it to running out of people? I don't know. But yeah, it will be. It can be felt, right? I mean, how many millions Russia has? So the more war stretches out, the more people flee, right? A lot of people also flee Russia because of conscription and things like that. So yeah, I didn't know it was so bad that they are like it's a crisis level of thing. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Let's watch it. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so that way I know we start videos to react to more. Check out other reaction. This is the link in the description. And yeah, let's watch it.
Chukotka is an unlikely center for a resurgence of Russian civilization. For one, it's hardly the center of anything. Its capital, Anadyr, is also the country's easternmost city and sits just below the Arctic Circle. It's closer to Chicago than it is to Moscow. A road connecting it to the rest of Siberia is on track for completion in 21 years. Until then, the only way out is this airport, accessible only by helicopter for half the year. Nor is there much civilization to be found. Despite being larger than France, the region's entire population would fill less than half of Michigan Stadium. Life here moves pretty slowly. When two brave Australian tourists visited in 2018, they made the local news. And yet, tiny, remote Anadyr, of all places, was one of the first stops Putin made this year. There, in a staged meeting with local residents, the president celebrated its rising number of large families, portraying the town as a model for the rest of the country, a beacon of hope for Russia's future. So, what rising number, exactly, was Putin referring to? A net population increase of 157 between 2010 and 2021, or 14 people per year.
What?
Not quite the shining success story the Kremlin would have you believe. Still, he wasn't wrong. An increase of 157, any increase, in fact, is far more than most places can claim. Between 2010 and 17, over 70% of Russian cities shrunk in size.
Okay.
And while Chukotka's fertility rate of 1.6 is well below the world average, it's among the highest in Russia, where children are becoming increasingly rare. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union had one of the highest birth rates in Europe. Its population peaked at nearly 149 million, making it the sixth largest country in the world. But after its collapse in '91, its birth rate has never recovered. Since then, more Russians have died than been born for every one of the last 33 years except 3. Russia.
Oh, I mean, the childbirth thing is an issue in many countries, right? Well, it's not really an issue. Some places like India, I don't know, it probably is an issue in China now because of like one child policy, more old people there, I don't know. But yeah, that is insane, man. Few hundred in like 10 or so years, and that's like a golden thing that Putin needs to like, oh, look at this place, be like that. Imagine that, right? Like you're such a remote place, like nobody really visits it. Like anybody from like abroad visit, and that's the local news. And just suddenly, by the way, president is here. It's like, your president, prime minister, whatever, like going to some like very remote village or something for some political reason, not to just like, oh, look at that president. There's meet and greet. No, for some agenda. That's insane. Like, okay, this is the thing I'm targeting at, and you're the great town for me to like as a poster child.
Was first overtaken by Pakistan, then Nigeria, and finally Bangladesh. And by the end of this century, it's expected to fall all the way down to 20th place, shrinking to 3.5 times smaller than the United States. Needless to say, these are troubling signs for a leader intent
Damn,
on
look at
reviving
India.
the Soviet legacy. And it gets worse. Because the Soviet Union collapsed.
Wait a minute, are you saying all the way to 2100, India is only going to reach 1.5? It's already 1.4 right now. Are you saying there's going to be stagnation? Like, there's no evidence of it. At least China did the one-child policy or something. There's no policy in India. I don't know, man.
33 years ago, birth rates fell 33 years ago. Which means today, 33 years later, Russia is missing a whole lot of 33-year-olds, the prime working age demographic. As a result, the country has a massive shortage of labor, especially of the blue-collar and tech variety, which skew much younger. A mere 15% of all workers are under 30 years old, and the unemployment rate has now reached a new low of just 2.6%. Not to mention, this dwindling...
Yeah, that's a problem, right? Because, first of all, if most of your workers are like under 30, like a lot of them are inexperienced just by age. And since you're like missing a lot of middle-aged person, right? Okay, you might have someone like a supervisor and like someone in high enough chain, somebody who's like experienced, but that's not enough, is it? So when you make things like reliability of that could be in question, right? Because young people are making it now.
20 to 35-year-old group is the exact one you'd need to, say, fight a troop-intensive war. Now, Russia is not alone. Far from it. China's birth rate, famously, fell much faster. Korea's is much worse. And Japan's has stayed low for even longer. Families across the developed world are getting smaller, and much of Europe and East Asia is shrinking. Take Italy.
Yeah, I always assume, okay, I don't post too much, I always assume like if your living condition is shit, there's not many happy moments in your life, right? Like your future legacy and children are the only thing you're like focusing on. If you're living in like a well enough developed country and like your life is like really good, I don't know, like every single moment, every single hour, right? People are not choosing to have kids. Like I don't care, but like too many population out there, like, you know, enough educated people, like too many population out there. I don't care about that type of. So every time you see like graphs, developed countries, like developed enough countries, like birth rate always goes down. So, you know, it sounds good in that way, but for like at least at the like you know, like in short period of time, economically that's a problem. Like if your population suddenly like largely old compared to like, you know, like balanced, right? Because if you're not gonna have like more kids, eventually you're gonna have a lot of old people compared to the young ones. So that's gonna be a problem.
For instance. As you can see, both it and Russia saw the same roughly 50% drop in births, albeit with a 10-year delay. Likewise, both will experience the same economic challenges stemming from their smaller working-age populations. More retirees withdrawing pensions than young people funding them. Fewer children left supporting a larger number of older relatives. Fewer inventors to invent things, landscapers to landscape, and caregivers to care for a growing cadre of seniors. Russia may be in trouble, you might think, but no more so than Italy or Japan or Britain. Nothing to see here. But there's a critical difference. While the effects may look the same, the causes couldn't be more different. In Italy, like most countries, these unfortunate problems have a silver lining. Birth rates fell because fewer teenagers were getting pregnant. Women could go to school, had more career opportunities, and were increasingly free to have as many or as few children as they wanted. An economic defeat, but a human victory. Whereas in Russia, this drop was less a choice and more a reaction to hard times, mass unemployment, and a general sense of uncertainty and despair. An economic and human failure. Meanwhile, Italians were also living longer, healthier lives. Medicine was advancing, the standard of living was rising, and pollution was being regulated. Thus, even while the country got older, the number of deaths, as you can see, remained more or less constant. The same cannot be said of Russia. And this is where the two countries really begin to diverge. There, deaths surged at the exact moment birth rates fell, producing what demographers call the Russian cross. And this was not just a temporary phenomenon. Deaths have remained high ever since. There's no silver lining to be found here. This is the bleak story.
Yeah, I mean, in Russia, like the whole history of like Soviet Union, right? It was like communism molded in a way with the Iron Curtain and things that they were like, whatever they were doing, if they're not successful, and if it fails, which it did, and now to rely on outside sources, to rely on the world, because that wasn't their doctrine at first, right? That was the whole point of Iron Curtain, right? So when it all failed, right, now like Soviet Union failed, now the Russian Federation, some form of Iron Curtain still stayed there, right, for whatever reason. Sometimes even like, foreign countries just not doing deals, like, like getting pissed off or something, right, sanctions and things. So yeah, way of living become even more worse than it was in Soviet Union, right? I mean, obviously, like compared to something like Moscow and St. Petersburg, like those cities are like thriving, obviously. But most of the Russia is just like it become harder and harder. So yeah, during those times, usually is if it's not death, it's migration, right? People just living like, I don't know, I'll find better life somewhere else type of way, walking away somewhere or something.
Of a nation being squeezed simultaneously from two directions: fewer births and more deaths. Consider for a moment the scale of this tragedy. The annual number of deaths more than doubled during the 30 years when HIV treatment, ICUs, and organ transplants became widely available. As the economist Nicholas Eberstadt once observed, the last 16 years of Soviet rule saw 11 million more births than deaths. Over the next 16 years, it saw 12 million more deaths than births. These are warlike casualties in peacetime. So, what exactly caused all these deaths? One clue is that heart-related fatalities, the leading kind, seem to spike on the weekend.
Yeah.
Another is that whatever the cause, it appears less common in Muslim-majority.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol, I'm guessing, right? Vodka. Alcohol is like insanely consumed, so it makes sense. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, living, like fleeting effect. Friday might as well be Saturday type of way. Look at that.
Regions. All signs, in other words, point to alcohol. The problem is not simply one of quantity, though it certainly doesn't.
Okay, again, don't want to pause too much, but I've seen that. Which video was that? Like the vodka was incentivized, right? It was the part of. I forgot the. Damn. But yeah, when the whole alcohol is incentivized, like given you as a reward, right? At that point, what happens? Like, yeah, shit like this. That's dangerous recipe, right? Again, like factors on like pisses off about Soviet Union. That's another. This video and the alcohol thing is like another thing, right? Like Soviet Union literally rewarded people like that with alcohol and things. Like, can you talk about like giving like mistreating your own people like that? I mean, come on. Of course, this was going to lead to this shit.
Help that in some years Russians have consumed almost double what the World Health Organization considers to be dangerous. The problem, above all, is what kind of alcohol, where, and when. The French sip wine, the British beer, and Russians overwhelmingly vodka. Some stereotypes, apparently, are true.
I mean, that's
Not
why
only do
stereotypes.
Russians get more intoxicated faster as a result, but a deeply embedded culture of social and
in today's woke world or something, people get pissed off about things, but you need to see the middle ground of everything. But you need to see context. Stereotypes are bad, but there's a reason they're stereotypes, right? Whenever they show you India and there's like cow walking in the road, that's not the case everywhere. But yeah, you'll probably see a cow if you come to India on middle of the road. That is gonna happen, right? That type of way. So stereotypes are usually exaggerated thing, but they are still there.
binge drinking compounds these effects. During Soviet times, vodka was sold with non-reusable caps. Bottles were consumed all at once, usually in groups, and often in uncontrolled public spaces, unsupervised by bartenders. This is an extremely lethal combination. So much so that every Russian male has a roughly 25 to 30% chance of dying one way or another
If they're
thanks to
drunk,
alcohol.
they can't complain.
The numbers on screen, bear in mind, are from 2012, but note how Russia's number is 10 times higher than America's. Researchers estimate that between
Estonia.
1990
But
and 2001, over half of all adult male deaths in Siberia were caused by alcohol. On top of this, about 30% of all crimes and 72% of all murders in 2017 were related to alcohol, according to the Kremlin. These are staggering numbers.
I mean, I don't know about this stat, man. If everybody's at alcohol, everything is related to alcohol. Even probably some scientists coming up with good things, probably alcohol related because he was drunk or something. I mean, I need more context on what it means by alcohol related. For alcohol, or they were like intoxicated, that's your point. Everyone's intoxicated at that point.
Particularly for one of the world's most highly educated countries, with an upper middle income, no less. Unsurprisingly, then, the Russian male life expectancy is just 68 years, closer to Haiti than Germany. The average male in Sweden, Switzerland, or Macau will live a full decade and a half longer. So why does the government accept this tragic state of affairs? Surely, even the most corrupt, authoritarian, and malevolent dictator would recognize this for the epidemic it is, if only out of self-interest. Well, as it turns out, serious efforts have been made in the past. During Soviet times, authorities estimated that Russians spent 15 to 20% of their incomes on vodka alone, and no fewer than 75% of work absences were attributed to alcohol. In response, Gorbachev, a non-drinker himself, launched the strictest crackdown before or since.
I mean, this is a piece
Prices
of
were
course he's gonna do that.
increased, manufacturing restricted, rules tightened, and curfews enforced. Entire
He's pissed
vineyards
off.
were even destroyed by the state. It worked. Almost immediately, consumption fell by 25%, and more importantly, it shifted from vodka to beer. In less than 3 years, the male life expectancy increased by 3.2 years. For women, 1.4. There was just one problem, or rather 28 billion, the number of rubles the government lost in tax revenue.
Yeah, there you go.
Which, as Mark Schrod points out in his book Vodka Politics, was roughly equivalent to Russia's total loss from the collapse of world oil prices.
See, that's the thing in our modern world, how economies are tied with everything. Even if you like, okay, 8 billion people on the planet, right? Especially in places like India and China, right? There are too many people here. Like, let's calm down. Even that causes your economical collapse. Like, if you don't have too much kids, you're gonna have too many old people, and there you go, economy is gonna collapse. Everything is so tied up, you can't change anything, right? That is one of the most leading factor why people are like denying global warming. Not because they don't believe it, because they don't. If they do that, they know like a lot of loss is gonna happen, right? Even though you think like, okay, let's see the broader picture here, right? Maybe let's tackle in a way that, okay, losses are inevitable, how to deal with that, rather than loss is going to happen, let's deny global warming. That's how fucked up it is. The modern world economy is created in a way that it's tied with everything. It's like a root of trees, like going everywhere basically. That is the problem, right? That's going to cause much bigger problem going forward, tackling any major issues. And the more world becomes global economy where every country is relying with each other, that's going to worsen things even more and more. That's why, like in India, Make in India initiative, everybody's trying to do their own thing, right? That's basically trying to get away from this economical mentality, right? Because even like countries tied with each other could have a problem. It's not just about military, like autonomy. No, it's many other things. Like, it's like domino effect. If one domino falls, everybody's screwed. So people are trying to stay away from that. That's why making your own country becoming a big thing now.
The Soviet Union at the time truly ran on vodka, the tax revenue from which funded 25% of the government's budget. So, left with no other choice, Gorbachev rolled back the campaign in 1988, just 3 years after it began. But it was too late. To fund the deficit, the Soviet Union began printing money, which broke the state-run economy, which led to shortages, which in turn caused its total collapse. It would be too simplistic to say the anti-alcohol campaign brought down the Soviet Union, but experts generally agree that it contributed at the very least to its demise.
I mean,
Then,
look, alcohol is no joke for around the world, right? I mean, look at the prohibition in USA, like what kind of profound effect it had, right, during the time. So yeah, imagine now that in Russia, which is much more amplified.
just when you thought things couldn't possibly get worse, they did. After 1991, alcohol suddenly became extremely cheap and even more accessible. In other words, the floodgates were opened after 3 years of pent-up demand at the exact moment Russians were at their most hopeless.
Half the
If
shelves
they
are
drank
alcohol.
profusely before, now they were off the charts. Consumption soared as they made up for lost time, and then some. Over 2 decades later, Putin's political placeholder, President Medvedev, tried again, this time with more modest reforms, mandating health warnings, cracking down on DUIs, and, if you can believe it, reclassifying beer as alcohol rather than mere food product. But once again, during its economic downturn in 2014, when it was in dire need of extra revenue, many of these measures were reversed.
Yeah, but see, in now Russia is in like wartime economy. It needs war as a thing to like propel its economy forward. Even that has like an asterisk on top, like how far, right? If you don't have results, how far can you go? But right now, that's what the case is. So now they can actually do the anti-alcohol thing even more, like somewhat safely, right? Because like wartime economy is like somewhat of a safety net. Even though like anti-alcohol thing might be an issue, but at least like they won't rely on that too much because they are relying on like different things now.
Meantime, Russians turned to all manner of far more dangerous alcohol substitutes. The lesson? Don't touch alcohol restrictions with a 10-foot pole. They're costly, they're wildly unpopular, and they don't work. During the Great Recession, Russia's finance minister removed any doubt about the government's true motives, saying the best thing ordinary citizens could do to help the economy was drink more. And one final cherry on top. A popular brand of Russian vodka is named after Putin, who, ironically, is a teetotaler like Gorbachev. Now, Russia almost certainly stands more to lose from encouraging alcohol consumption than it does to gain from taxing it. As early as 2006, Putin declared the demographic crisis to be Russia's, quote, most important problem. 2 decades later, he continues to say similar things, most recently on his trip to Anadyr. And this isn't just empty rhetoric. The country's maternity capital program encourages population growth by giving new families a one-time payment for giving birth to or adopting a child.
Damn.
Still, these are relatively easy.
Damn, it's the same thing. Electric thing government started to do, right? If you have an electric car, you have incentive like tax write-off or something like that, like less RTO road tax and things like that. Britain even went a bit ahead, like you can literally get money back if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure Clarkson was talking about that. Like you can get back the money, like government will give you the money if you buy an electric car. So they're doing that with the birth rate now.
Low-risk policies, and frankly, likely not all that effective. Whenever this demographic goal conflicts with any other goal, the latter inevitably wins. Year after year, Putin has made short-term decisions that aggravate the problem and mortgage Russia's future. Take healthcare, for example. In a recent report, Russia ranked last out of 55 countries for healthcare efficiency. Hospitals are so dirty, corruption so rampant, and medical practices so outdated that—
Damn, you're saying least efficient one? Okay. Well, Chile, Italy, Spain, Singapore, Hong Kong, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
many people, especially those outside major cities, avoid seeking care altogether. At no time was this more on display than during the COVID-19 pandemic. Distrustful of the government, people avoided vaccines. Today, a smaller share of its population is fully vaccinated than the lowest US state,
Look at that,
Wyoming.
Americans and Russians share a
As
lot
a
of
result,
things.
as many as 1 million Russians may have died of the virus, according to outside estimates. If true, this would make it one of the highest per capita death rates in the world. Rather than fund its
See, the problem with the vaccine thing is like vaccine works. That's a fact. But people should have, like, the people who, like, scientists and things should have come out and say, like, this is kind of like experimental stages, because we just done it like a few months ago. Like, we're giving it out right now. Like, we don't have 10 years to do things, right? So we don't know what the side effects will be. Even FDA requires 10 years of anything before FDA can approve on anything, right? So this vaccine thing, like, we just made it in few months, right? And like, we're just giving it away right now with barely any, like, testing. If you're really healthy, not really healthy, like, if you think you're healthy enough to take the vaccine, take it. If you're really healthy and don't want to take the vaccine and take a chance, that's okay, a different thing, right? If you have something like a heart issue and things like that, maybe, I mean, try to stay away and, like, don't want to take a vaccine, fine. But no, everybody just like, oh, you have to take vaccine. That's like, that basically, like, will give you immortality or some shit like that. Like, people talked it that way, and that was the problem. That spurred the, like, okay, this guy got some kind of a heart problem. We can't really link vaccine to heart problem, but who knows, right? That's the thing. We don't have much time to know that. Now, obviously, like, enough years has passed, slowly we'll realize the effect of vaccines. Vaccines work, that's a fact. Its side effect, nobody knows. So the side effect became the issue. And side effects, the one people are like, oh, I don't trust the government because of side effect. People are not educated enough to realize, like, side effect, like, that's unknown territory. We can't really know that. And government's part, like I said, they could have phrased it better. And like, like, shouldn't have just shove down everybody's, down everybody's throat. Like, you have to take this type of way, right? Take vaccine, is healthy people around you, but, like, somewhat freedom should have been given there, right? I don't know.
Dated hospitals, the government diverts money toward the military. Estimates of Russian casualties from its war with Ukraine range between 100,000 and 500,000. In either case, a massive chunk of the demographic its economy
I
needs.
thought 500,000 would be the number. How many went there? That could be the casualty number. That is insane. That means, yeah, man. This, how many? Like, it's already crossed a million mark or something just by Russians.
The most. Not to mention, countless families have fled the country since the war began.
That's the main
likely
thing.
1 to 2 million, including 200,000 in the first 10 days of the invasion alone. Keep in mind that only 29% of the population, the elite, hold a passport. Those who
Look at that. It's like from 2012 and forward after the Crimea thing. Yeah. But then again, like, all the Russians who, like, migrated to Crimea, is this number part of it? Like, that could make sense. I don't know.
are leaving, in other words, are disproportionately young, wealthy, well-educated, and have skills in high demand. The loss of 100,000
Mercedes,
software
BMW, Range
engineers
Rover,
on its
damn.
own will cause chaos in Russia's once thriving technology industry. Add all this up: alcohol use, declining birth rates, the poor state of healthcare, the pandemic, war, and the subsequent exodus, and Russia has a serious problem.
Yeah.
It's running out of people. In 2020 and 21, its population declined by over 1 million, and the worst may still be yet to come. Again, none of this was unforeseeable, which only makes the Russian government's inaction that much more concerning. Perhaps it should have taken the Understanding Graphs course on today's sponsor, Brilliant, which culminates
Smooth. Yeah, people go to brilliant.org/polymatter. Why am I trouble saying? Yeah, brilliant.org/polymatter and support this channel. Yeah, the Russia is running out of people. I didn't know it was this bad, right? I mean, I always knew, like, post World War II, Russia already had issue with population. Now, like, with Soviet Union, vodka, like, incentivized vodka in Soviet Union, fall of Soviet Union, which didn't help his economical structure, which was tied with Iron Curtain and things. But now, yeah, and, like, if Russia had gone like China's way of, like, letting in the business and be a business capital of China became, right? All the business around the world, from Western worlds like USA and places, China become too powerful, right? Because of its, like, vast population, labor, and, like, everything. Basically, they just took on everything from outside and built their business up. If Russia had done that, Russia would have been better. But no, Russia still kept to that, closed down mentality. Certain actions led to sanctions, and yeah, it's just becoming worse. I don't know how they're going to tackle that, but hey. But like he said, Russia is not the only country who's suffering from that. But Russia is like, because of everything recent now, because of like their special military operation, is just gonna get worse. Horrible, that was Russia is running out of people by channel Polymatter. If you like my next, don't forget to subscribe. If you want me to do any specific video, comment down, and I'll see you next time.